Right, so Labour is facing an extinction level event ahead of the local elections next week as a catastrophic poll has dropped, putting Labour on course to lose 370 seats come the next general election, most of them to Reform UK on balance, leaving them with just 41 MPs, which, if it were to come to pass, would be the lowest number of MPs Labour have had since 1910. So never mind Corbyn and that misleading claim of worst general election since 1935 that followed the 2020 general election. Starmer lying his way into power last July has been well and truly rumbled already, and all inside 9 months. Does anyone really believe Starmer is the guy to turn something like that around? This is of course just one poll, and likely an outlier at that, but it is still consistent with polling trends showing Labour support collapsing, though, and it's all on Starmer. All on the rancid attacks on ordinary working class people and families, from the old to the young, for the sake of the rich. It's not all going Reform UK's way, though. Despite media narratives constantly rabbiting on about them as if they're the only players in the room, that they are changed from Labour and the Tories, despite also being a bunch of millionaires representing the rich as well, the Greens are quietly picking up more and more support too, particularly in certain demographics, and having increased their own representation 7 years running in local elections. Will they continue that trend this time around as well? Right, so it's one heck of a claim you're making here, Damo, off the back of one poll. Extinction level event in relation to Labour, you might be thinking. And from my perspective as a former Labour member and my own bias, I say bring that on. Labour are the biggest barrier to change going, in my view, and are ushering in an era of fascism if Farage ever gets near the reins of power, combined with completely selling the nation out to Donald Trump as he would in a heartbeat. Yet as the UK political parties approach their first major electoral test since last year's general election, it is precisely this language that political observers and insiders are beginning to use when describing the plight of the Labour Party under Keir Starmer's mismanagement. According to a devastating poll from Find Out Now, Labour faces the prospect of being reduced to a mere 41 seats in Parliament, should it come to pass, which would be its lowest level of representation since 1910. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage's Reform UK, buoyed by a toxic mix of media saturation and absolute disillusionment with traditional parties, would, according to the same poll, be on course for a shock majority. The coming local elections, therefore, often dismissed as not being relevant towards a general election picture, have nevertheless transformed into something of a full-blown existential referendum on Labour's political future. A supermajority and a lot of goodwill as the Tories were finally dumped out of power, and Keir Starmer has shredded absolutely every bit of it with disenchantment, betrayal and broken promises. And as such, despite the Tories defending the vast majority of the seats in next week's local elections, the results could well mark serious damage for Labour as well, widely expected to. It's difficult to overstate the scale and speed of Labour's collapse, though. I've never seen anything like it. But it is par for the course when someone as dishonest as Keir Starmer leads something. Just 9 months ago, the party stormed to power with a supermajority, capitalising on widespread disgust at the end of 14 years of Conservative rule, anyone but the Tories and all of that. Labour promising change, and people hoped it really would be. Instead, they have delivered paralysis, compromise and betrayal as Starmer continues with austerity and cruelty as if the Tories never left office at all. Labour's promises of renewal have curdled into policies barely distinguishable from their Tory predecessors. And now, with the first set of local elections to be held since Starmer became PM, Labour stands on the edge of massive defeats, even though the Tories are making the most offences. If the Find Out Now poll holds true, Labour would be reduced to the 5th largest party in Parliament, behind the Conservatives, behind Reform UK, behind the Liberal Democrats, behind the Scottish National Party. The figure of 41 seats would be apocalyptic. To put it in perspective, the last time Labour had that few MPs, King George V was on the throne, women couldn't vote, and the Titanic had not yet set sail. All on Starmer if it happens. All on the Labour right if it happens. The seeds of this apparent Labour collapse were sown almost immediately after taking power. Starmer's Labour turned its back on the agenda for change it had promised and instead implemented arbitrary fiscal rules, cuts for pensioners, cuts for families, cuts for kids, no cuts for the rich. Same old Tories then. The result of that has been anger across the political spectrum as progressives feel betrayed and traditional working class voters feel ignored by the party supposedly set up to represent them. Next week's local elections will be an opportunity for an awful lot of people to hand out a lot of bloody noses. It will give the first concrete glimpse of just how far Labour has fallen, with the Tories expected to plummet as well. If that doesn't happen, or Labour don't suck up a lot of their seats, losing them to other parties, it will still be seen as an absolute disaster. But that isn't to say Labour have an inbuilt advantage on every front, though. The by-election in Runcorn is going to be held too, where Labour is desperately defending a safe seat on the face of it after the conviction of Mike Amesbury following a brawl in the street. That looks likely to fall to Reform UK. Their candidate, Sarah Potchin, has been caught on camera backing Labour's cuts to the winter fuel allowance. So it really does wind me up no end that people keep getting presented with change candidates when the only change ends up being the colour of the rosette at the end of the day, and the same old cruelty, the same old austerity still gets meted out more and more. Such a result would be catastrophic, symbolising Labour's inability to hold areas once considered a heartland. A 15,000 vote majority is what Amesbury was holding in that seat. It was a new one following boundary changes, but the original seats were largely Labour as well. Similarly, in the 6 mayoral contests up for grabs, Labour faces an absolute wipeout. Of the 4 of those that Labour are incumbents in, the 4 seats that currently exist, 2 of them are brand new, current projections suggest they're going to lose every single one of them. Perhaps most stunningly, in the west of England, the Green Party are poised to potentially claim their first ever mayoralty, capitalising on Labour's collapse and the disgrace of outgoing Labour Mayor Dan Norris. That would be an achievement that frankly cannot be overstated, given the Greens get next to sod all press attention, especially compared to Reform UK. A Green mayoralty would reflect not only a hunger for radical alternatives, but genuinely progressive ones as well, show that actually the Green social media game is making up somewhat for the lack of mainstream media attention they get, and may actually be part of a generational and demographical shift towards progressive politics, despite what is happening in the establishment parties, as we might as well call Labour, the Tories, and Reform UK. According to recent analysis published by The Guardian, whilst young men have increasingly drifted towards the far-right politics of Reform UK, young women as a demographic have instead been flocking to the Greens, seeing them as the true torchbearers of social and environmental justice. Generation Z abandoning traditional parties more and more, it would seem, but winning the argument on what would be real change still seems all too sadly to be within the power of the mainstream media to an extent. For example, what is it about Reform UK that says change from the Starmer Labour Party or the Tories? Farage the millionaire, Tice the millionaire. They've just ditched Rupert Lowe, but again, a millionaire. Over 60 of Reform's candidates in the local elections are former Tory MPs and councillors, including Lincolnshire's mayoral candidate Andrea Jenkin, best known for giving the middle finger to protesters more than any discernible political goodwill or talent. Farage's Reform UK is repackaged, rebranded fascism. It's the same drivel that drove Brexit, and you put this clown in charge of the country after all that now? Have you learned nothing? It's a reactionary recycling of the same failed politics that have brought Britain to its knees under the Tories, and again under rehashed Blairism under Starmer. It's not change, it's more of the same, just with even more right-wing tendencies. Reform UK benefits enormously from media saturation. Television panels and tabloid front pages have amplified Farage far beyond the party's actual organisational strength and way beyond any discernible talent. Meanwhile, smaller but growing forces of genuine change like the Greens receive just a fraction of the coverage, despite clear evidence of momentum, particularly amongst crucial younger demographics, where they get to see what the Green Party are all about. But it's not unique to them either. And even going into what they know are going to be tough local elections, Labour just can't help but seem to make life worse for themselves. Most notably has been the abandonment of the transgender community following a rancid Supreme Court ruling on gender recognition that was a betrayal that shattered Labour's alleged progressive credibility once again, but which in truth was just another Starmer lie, as everything always seems to be. In an era where inclusion and dignity are core values for a great many voters, not just the young, a great many voters, the trans community, which is a significant demographic in its own right, and Labour's abandonment of them, its craven retreat under pressure, is an abject moral failure, and I do have more to say on that story. I haven't covered it yet on this channel properly, but I will intend to. Another example of Labour abandonment and betrayal that has just come out, though, hitting us all in the cost of living crisis yet again, has been Ed Miliband's disastrous energy policy announcement proposing to charge households in the south of England more for electricity than those in the north, so making electric bills a postcode lottery. Rather than pursuing renationalisation of energy for the common good, what Labour supposedly stood for, ordinary working class people, for socialism, Labour have instead opted for divisive bureaucratic messes backing shareholders over the general public. The rich get backed again by Starmer's Labour. Now, it is often said that local elections are poor predictors of general election outcomes, and this is quite often usually true, but these local elections are the first significant political events since Labour took power. So in that context, they still are a bit of a litmus test. If Labour hemorrhages support to Reform UK, the Greens, the Lib Dems, while the Tories also collapse, it will confirm that a major realignment is actually underway, and the signs are already there. Professor John Curtis has described the current political situation as unprecedented, noting the scale of support for Reform UK amongst disillusioned voters. And then, of course, there are the reports that the Greens are leading Labour in key areas, including that nail-biting contest in the West of England mayoralty, which is a lot of people are going to be keeping an eye on. If the Greens can take that prize, it will be a landmark moment for them, and a devastating rebuke to Starmer's leadership. And that progressive politics has a new home. It certainly isn't his Labour anymore. He told us if we didn't like his politics, we could use the door and leave. Well, we've left. It seems a lot of us have moved to the Green Party and are voting Green now. About to hand them a mayoralty, maybe. The Labour Party is, all things considered, seemingly very much hurtling towards an extinction-level event, and one entirely of its own making. All driven by the fool that leads them now. If the Find Out Now poll proves in any way accurate, and we have 4 years, anything can happen in 4 years. Labour ditching Starmer, the singularly most important thing they could do for their own survival, in my view, though frankly, would anybody any better replace him? Labour would not merely be defeated but destroyed, reduced to an irrelevant political rump. We need genuine change, not merely saying it like Starmer did and fooling too many people. British politics is entering a new and deeply uncertain era where the hard-right nationalism of Reform UK is becoming frighteningly dominant, against Starmer's doing, and the nascent radicalism of the Greens, which we need more of, continues to be muted, and with a broken and directionless Labour Party fading into history, hopefully with the Tories along with them. If Labour get hammered, it will quite simply be because they deserve it. They haven't delivered the change they promised. We don't like being lied to. In which case, isn't it time we stopped listening to and voting for the next set of liars in waiting that the establishment queue up for us, being fooled by them time after time? Johnson over Corbyn. A depressing choice between Starmer and Sunak last time, and you'd put your faith in Nigel Farage next time, would you, as something for change? Please just don't. Of course, you don't just have to take my word over why you shouldn't back Starmer and should opt for more progressive options for real change. There are a multitude of former councillors and elected officials who have quit the party in recent weeks, hammering Starmer's Labour on the way. And one of the most recent has given an absolutely epic speech as to exactly why he can't support and be part of the party any longer. So have a watch of this in this video recommendation. Here's your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as supporting the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. Only power to account for ordinary working class people. I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.